Hey guys! So this is my second installment in the series of me ranting and reviewing Jonathan Kellerman books. If you haven't followed until now, these are murder mysteries that I tend to read in my downtime and reread. I've read the whole series multiple times. A new book comes out in February, and that's the only one I haven't read multiple times. And I really like the characters. Some other things about the books I love, some other things about the books bother me, and I just wanted a chance to discuss that with other people who care. So, this is the second book in the series. It's called Blood Test. I'd said in my Facebook commentary that this is one of the most depressing Kellerman books, and that very well may be the case. So just as a brief synopsis for anyone who hasn't read it, and again, there's going to be spoilers ahead, so if you haven't read it, this perhaps is not the video for you, but just in case. And this is me recapping it from memory. I didn't make any notes on this, so just going over it. So, as we know, Alex Delaware, one of the two main characters, is a child psychologist. And he apparently has previously worked with an internationally renowned children's cancer researcher named Raul Melendez-Lynch, who pops up briefly in future books, but this is his primary book. And apparently in the past, Alex was used to make sure that children being treated for cancer and being a part of cancer research were not being traumatized unnecessarily by the process, and he was very effective in that. So in this book, Raul is treating a young boy named Woody Swope. Now that I think about it, let's say the name of it, Swope. He's treating a young boy named Woody, and he has a treatable but very, very severe type of cancer, and his parents are refusing treatment, and Raul is not necessarily sure of why, and he's bringing in Alex to help, essentially. And Raul is a brilliant and difficult person, and he's not necessarily good at relating to people. So someone like Alex could theoretically be very helpful. But so Alex does go to the hospital, meets the kid, etc. But before he has a chance to really talk to or involve himself in the case, everybody disappears. Woody, his sister, and his parents, that's the entire family, they all disappear. And Alex goes to the hotel where they were staying and finds blood, so he calls Milo. Milo is his best friend, a homicide detective with the Los Angeles Police Department. And they essentially start to investigate the disappearance, both Milo from a police perspective and Alex as just kind of a obsessed person that cares about what happens. And ultimately they find the parents killed. They don't find the sister and the boy until the end of the book. And I guess that's pretty much all I can say without giving away too many spoilers. So here, that means there's going to be spoilers anyways, because these are my notes, and some of them are spoilers. So anyhow, Kellerman likes reusing the same plot devices, and it makes it harder to suspend disbelief. This is a big pet peeve of mine with these books, because sometimes I forget which book I'm reading. So in this book, someone unrelated to this case tries to torch Alex's house. And then in a different book, someone else who's very similar tries to torch Alex's house and succeeds. And so when I'm reading this book, having reread the whole series multiple times, I'm like, okay, wait, is this the book Alex's house burns down? No, that's a different book. But it seems so similar. There's multiple times in the book where Milo can't deal with Alex because he's busy working on another case, and in multiple books, that case is a serial killer who shits on the victim's stomach, and he's referred to as the stomach shitter, which is an appropriate name, but that keeps coming up in multiple books. But they caught him in this book, So then is it the same stomach shitter in a different book, or is it that Kellerman just keeps using that as an archetype of something that distracts Milo? But like, it's always a stomach shitter. Like, what the deal? So, and then there's multiple times where Robin, Alex's girlfriend, who is a luthier who builds and repairs guitars, is courted by a Japanese factory. And sometimes she goes over there and looks into it, says this isn't for me. Sometimes she goes over there and makes a line of guitars. But it's always written as though it's the first time that anybody's been interested in her. And then he alludes to a rock star named Billy Orleans, who she makes guitars for, or makes a line of guitars for one of the factories for. And again, every time these plot devices are used, it's brought up as though it's the first time it happened. But it's the same plot device that was used in a different book. And if it's going to be a continuation of the same thread, then make it a continuation of the same thread. And if it's going to be, if it's going to be, no, this is happening for the first time, then make it a different thing. Don't make it the same thing because I get confused. I forget which book I'm in. Like, I think there's one book where, it could be this one, I can't even remember now, where where Alex wants to leave Robin because she's becoming more independent as she's a guitar mogul now. And it has to do with her working for a Japanese company and building guitars and things like that. And I mean, I can't remember. Is it this book or is it a different book? And then some books, they actually split up, and it just, yeah. So, big pet peeve of mine. You won't notice that if you're reading this book for the first time, but that if you read this book in a future book, you will, because you're like, well, didn't that already happen back in? It did. So, but that's not the same. So it's a big pet peeve of mine. In earlier books, Milo has a partner. As you know, detectives have partners, as we learned from Law and Order. Lenny Briscoe, and I guess most people probably picture him with Ed Green, but Chris Noth was, Anyhow, so Milo has a partner named Delano Hardy, and again, there's continuity issues with his character, because in this book he mentions being divorced. In subsequent books, Milo talks about his wife stepping out on him, so did he get remarried and that wife is cheating on him? And then in future books after that, Milo talks about how Del is no longer cool with Milo because his wife is homophobic and Milo's gay. And so is it all the same wife? Is it different wives? How many marriages has he had? Next note, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, but there's a fruit called the cherimoya that features prominently in this book because Woody, the kid that was sick, his parents are growers. They're fruit growers. And that was the father's area of expertise. And it's described in this book as just being amazing. And every time I read the book, I say I'm going to try one, and I've never gone out and tried it. So if I do, perhaps I'll film it. But the book says that you can either get poor quality ones at Mexican grocers or high quality ones at gourmet grocers. And around here, I don't know if we have any gourmet produce grocers left. So I wouldn't want my first experience to be with a poor quality one. So we'll see. So there's an ancillary character named Ezra Mayman who also has a nursery, and it's described that when they enter the nursery, he flips a switch and then a bunch of lights turn on sequentially. And as somebody who's done lighting design both theatrically and commercial, and somebody who's worked as an electrician, that always bothers me, because the only way to do that, have it come on one after the other sequentially, the book says, as if choreographed, would be to have them on separately timed relays, and there'd be no reason to do that. If you turn on a switch that operates a lighting contactor, everything will come on at the same time or approximately the same time. Someone on Facebook suggested that maybe it was just fluorescent lights starting up at different times, but even if you think about preheat fluorescence, they all go flick, 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 and then they all come on at, it wouldn't be sequentially. That always bothers me. It probably doesn't bother anyone else. One of the characters writes in his diary and says, and I'm quoting this, "Riches, fame, which is paramount? No matter, there will be both." And every time I read that, I'm like, first of all, do people talk like that? But then second of all, do people write in their diary like that? And there's another book in the future where a character named Black Jack writes in a journal, and that's like very exculpatory in terms of the plot. And it always bothered me. Like, do do people write in their journals the same way that a comic book villain monologues? And I even talked about how one of the primary villains in the last book did some comic book monologuing at the end. And I know it's a commonly used device in fiction, but it always kind of breaks the fourth wall a little bit in a bad way to me. And I always think of The Incredibles, where Incrediboy says, "You got me monologuing again," or something to that effect. Okay, so there's a big reveal near the end of the book where Alex is reading botanical taxonomy. Did I say that right? Good for me if I did. That gives him the answer. Like, it opens his eyes to everything that happened, and it never says specifically what it is that he read. And I know that he was looking in the journals where they had referenced a type of fruit or a type of plant or a type of, whatever growing thing named Anana zingiber. I'm probably saying that wrong. And so the only thing I can think of that he found at the end of botanical taxonomy that would have given things away would be the textbook definition of zingiber, which I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's the Latin name for ginger. So, which makes sense, I guess, because one of the characters in the book is often spoken of their red hair. But it doesn't seem to be a huge reveal, and the book never says specifically what he found there. Okay, so big spoiler. So one of the primary villains in the book is a character named Carmichael, and I never found him believable as a villain, because when Alex and Milo first meet him near the beginning of the book, they find him very endearing, and they find him very believable, and they find him, like, the author goes into great detail to describe his reactions and how uncomfortable he is, and just like how he's reacting to the news that he's hearing, and how he's reacting to Alex and Milo, which means that looking back, he would have to be acting then, and he would have to be an incredible actor, capable of fooling both Alex and Milo. And then Alex talks about how much he likes this character and how much he feels this, that way, and the other way, and Alex is known for having pretty good intuition. So for him to turn out to be the villain, it means that Alex and Milo both were completely fooled and completely wrong in their intuition, and that doesn't really fit the characters. So that always bothered me, and it made me think. And I've said I always wonder, because there are other books in the same series where a character seems to make a complete about face, where they're written one way until we find out that they're the villain, and then they're written another way. And I happen to know that Aaron Sorkin, who's one of my favorite writers, talked about how, like with The West Wing, for example, he like, people would ask him, so, did you know how the election was going to play out? Did you know that the president was going to have multiple sclerosis? And he'd be like, no, I never thought about what was going to be after the episode I was writing. I wrote the best episode I could, and then, I didn't even think about, sometimes I wrote myself into a corner because I had no idea of where I was going after that. But it seems like a lot of great writers, especially great writers that are good at writing characters as opposed to plots, write that way, where they literally, they don't think far ahead. They just write the best thing they can in the moment, and sometimes that means there has to be some plot holes and some continuity errors in order to bring everything together and to, solve it at the end. And I always wondered, does Kellerman write that way? Does he write, like, this chapter, like he starts writing the book without knowing who the villain's going to be, or does he always know who the villain's going to be by the end of the book? So, next note is that I really want a better ending for Nona. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. Nona, I'm guessing. Despite everything, I really like her, and I'm under the impression that Alex likes her as well. And what happens to her in the end is really kind of sad. I really like Raoul as a character. He seems like a very real character. We think we all know geniuses like that. And I'm glad that he pops up in future books, although I wish he would have bigger roles in future books. He only has very small roles in future books. So, that's it for my notes for Blood Test. And the next book is Over the Edge, which at the time that I've recorded this, I've already started reading it for the however manyth time. I'm maybe a third of the way through. So I hope that you guys are enjoying these. And I will see you when I get to the end of that book. So thanks for watching.